in my time working here, I knew of the original Rice Carnival, and of course I know what the festival is like today, but I always kind of wondered the how and why we got from point A to point B with that. And so that's kind of what we're looking at right now. And I found in my research that the story of the carnival and now the festival kind of divides itself into 3 pretty neat little chapters, which was very convenient for someone making a presentation. And it all got started in 1909, in the earlier days of rice. A number of farmers and local businessmen wanted to get together and celebrate another successful crop. You know, rice was still pretty new in the area at the time, but it was very much on its way. Things were going well. And some of the people credited with that original idea would be Anna B. Stoops, who managed water and electric company for many, many years, and George Fagan, who was one of the first men in the area to grow rice on a large scale, among the first in the county. And before the Rice Carnival came about, Stuttgart had been doing an annual fair on our old fairgrounds, which had a racetrack. You might have heard of it from a particularly charming and well-spoken redhead. But their original idea was to combine forces with the fair and the carnival, but that angle was pretty quickly dropped. Not real sure why, but they dropped it pretty quick. And kind of speaking of the track, I did start to wonder if maybe Joe Bush had participated in the parade whenever the carnival came about, because those first floats were mule-drawn or horse-drawn, and in a lot of our photos you can see the horses being led. So I kind of wondered, like, if he had a hand in that, if he helped lead some of the horses, or if the racetrack provided some of the horses, I'm not sure. But I digress. They did hope to make it as near a Mardi Gras as possible, and those are the words of Dr. Harold Glenn, whose article on life in Stuttgart at the time has been a very helpful resource to us. I think it's been referenced in half of our presentations, at least so far. But once the idea was decided upon, they set the date for November 15th through the 20th, and the wheels were in motion. The festivities naturally included a parade and a pageant to crown the Rice Queen, and also there were various exhibitions. Prizes were offered for things like the best decorated house, best decorated car, and even bicycles, which we'll kind of come back to. But the home of Mr. Price, W.M. Price, won for the best decorated house that first year, and that was the house that was on 2nd and Anna, but I don't have a picture of it all dolled up, which is a shame. But the man who won for best decorated car was John M. Ellis, and we do have a picture of that. We have a couple of pictures here, some of the cars that were in that year's festivities. One of them was Philip Wrench's car, and then we've got one here that isn't named, but it's very nice. Much like the festival today, a carnival amusement company had attractions that they brought into town and stretched along Main, kind of between 2nd and 4th. And one of the main exhibitions in the carnival's earlier years was called the Women's Department. And it would feature things like hand-painted china, some of which came from the training school, things like that, that were done by the ladies of Stuttgart. And prizes were given out to participants for particularly excellent work. And one of the prizes that they did was a silver spoon, which we have a theory. We've got a spoon in our memorabilia case over there that has Stuttgart etched into the handle. And so we think that may be one such spoon, but we kind of need to confirm that. but it's a very cool spoon if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you check it out on your way through. But in any case, our first ever Rice Queen was little Dorothy Fagan. She was the 4-year-old granddaughter of George Fagan. And I wish we had a picture of her because I can only imagine how cute she was. I think I've heard of a picture existing though, so it may just be buried in here in one of our boxes. And I want to say that the dress she wore that year was actually made of rice stalks. I think I've heard of that, or somebody wore a dress made out of rice stalks. Maybe it wasn't her, but I've heard this story before. And she was crowned by the governor at the time. And that's how it was each year. The governor would come in and crown the Rice Queen. So he met little Dorothy, and got things started. Got the parade started. Yeah, okay, there we go. When Governor when Governor Donaghy's train arrived into town, he was met with a pretty big reception, a pretty big delegation of 20 ladies riding side saddle, 20 horsemen, 4 pages, and a band that was described as having much pomp and ceremony. Together they escorted him through the streets of Stuttgart, past, every house was decorated with bunting and rice, and that would just be so cool. Like to see a whole town decked out like that, it would just be a really cool sight. But he, like I said, he met and crowned little Dorothy, and that is what would kick off the parade officially. And it was a very impressive parade from all accounts. There were 30 horse or mule drawn floats, and I don't know if that includes the cars or not, but we've got, oops, there we go. That was that other one. This particular float, which I'm pretty sure is from 1909, though it was not dated, it's clearly one of the earliest festivals. It actually has a banner that's very hard to read, but it says, through much zooming in, it says, "A Voyage for Better Rural Schools." Because the schools, all the local schools at the time, this is pre-consolidation, so they would have their own floats, and there were business floats and floats for the different clubs and organizations. It was all kinds of floats. And we're gonna see some pretty cool footage of floats in here in a little bit. This is Red Star Flour. I finally figured out what company that was. I was like, what's Red Star? What's Red Star? Let's see. And in addition, I'm getting ahead of myself there. In addition to the floats and the cars, there were 40 mothers who were pushing little baby strollers down the streets, with their little kids all dolled up. And there were also 35 little boys who rode decorated bicycles. And Dr. Glenn, that we referenced earlier, was one of those little boys. And we actually have a funny little story from his memories of the carnival, and I'm just gonna read it to you. He wrote this for the Grand Prairie Historical Bulletin. He says, let's see if I can project and read at the same time here with my chin tucked. "The parade formed at 12th and Main, and Mother had fixed up my bicycle something special with bunting in the carnival colors. Green for the growing rice plant, gold for the ripened grain, and white for the milled rice. The wheels were completely covered by the tricolored bunting, which was drawn in at the hubs. When I reached the assembly place and saw the other bicycles, I knew I had won the prize hands down. But for some unexplained reason, the bicycle parade was postponed until the next day. The next day, it was plain to see that some of the other boys had gotten some ideas from my bicycle, and the competition was going to be more difficult. The parade started, and before we had gone 1 block, my bunting yielded to the 3 trips from home to the starting place, and having worn through, gathered in a tangled mess of bunting around the wheel hubs. I did not win the prize." Let's see. And the committee who put this first celebration together, they financed the whole thing on $650 raised by popular subscription. And best we can tell, that was approximately like $20,000 today. I entered it into multiple calculators because I can't do math, y'all. But that was the number that kept coming up. So I guess that's right. It just seems like not the number I expected. They had some leftover funds, and they used that to send a little souvenir home with their donors. And we actually are lucky enough to have one that's been preserved. This one, it was the one given to William Welchman, who owned the harness shop that we talked about in our race, a little bit in our racetrack program. And you guys are welcome to take a closer look, but it says honor Arkansas Rice Carnival, and it has the date, and that is the original stalks of rice that are up there on the pins to the ribbon, this like white satin ribbon. And our other little thing up there is actually from the next year's festival. That's a carnival glass from 1910. I'm not real sure whose name is on that one, but they definitely upped their game on the souvenirs, I think. And anyway, speaking of, the 1910 Rice Carnival really eclipsed the first one. They're said to have eclipsed the first one. This is a float that I did not expect this when I found it, but that is a float for the Stuttgart Sanitarium in 1910. Those are all the names of the people, but I can't quite read them at this angle. And then this is that year's Rice Queen, Ethel Pettit Roche. But as I said, it eclipsed the first one, but added grandeur and attractions kind of meant added expense. And so the after effect was a bit of a deficit. This and some other kind of unspecified financial struggles at the time kind of rained on the parade a little bit for a couple of years, and then came First World War, and especially whenever we started participating in 1917, the carnival was just set aside for more serious things that needed to be worried about. And so there wasn't a carnival for a while. It was 1909, 1910, and then nothing for a little while. But in 1921, a group of businessmen were really seeking to bring the community back to a happier era. You know, they wanted to revive it, they wanted to have fun again, and so they set to reviving the carnival. And this is that year's Rice Queen, but we had a lot of cool stuff about carnivals in the 20s. And so, you know, we've all heard this time be referred to as the Roaring 20s. And from what we've read about carnivals of the time, like, that name holds true for these carnivals. It was massive. The 1922 carnival, that parade, attendance at that carnival was estimated to be anywhere between 8,000 and 15,000, with 12,000 being like kind of the middle ground there, probably the most accurate estimate. And Stuttgart's population at the time was only 4,500, so that's a lot of out-of-towners. And here from that year we have our Rice Queen, Elizabeth Wrench, and this is her royal court float. And it almost seemed like that photo could be later, but it's not. That's the same people. So Queen Elizabeth and King Ralph Kuntz got the parade started at 11 in the morning following their coronation ceremony at 3rd and Main. And this parade, I said it already, but this parade was huge. The local schools came out in full force. Is one person's account of it. The Rice Growers Co-op Association and Farm Bureau were very well represented in the parade. All association mills were closed for the day. Employees were given a holiday but instructed to participate in the parade. And it's estimated that there were 1,000 people participating in the parade that day, or that day. And it was nearly 2 miles long. The parade turned around at 16th Street, and at 6th Street there was a little bit of a traffic jam that resulted of the head of the parade kind of getting tangled up with the tractor division. And that was a result of the post that was in the middle of Main Street at the time. You can see there's that picture of it over there on the wall. But despite that little hiccup, the parade was later described as one of the best parades ever staged in Stuttgart. And this is the Clear Point Floors float from little bit later, not this parade, 1926. This particular float I chose to show a picture of because it actually won first prize for the floats that year. And I said earlier that we would see some pretty cool parade footage. So are you guys ready for a movie? It's movie day, class. Teacher's tired. This is the late 20s.
And we're going to see a caterpillar here in a minute. It's all covered up. Oh, the caterpillar's in this next. This is going to be now 1928, Rice Carnival.
Yeah, sometimes they were in October back then. Before duck calling came around.
There's a bunch of horses up there riding. There's your caterpillar. That was always a lot of fun, if you know what I mean. Now we're going to have the crowning of the Queen of the 1928 Arkansas Rice Carnival. Now this young lady that is the crown bearer is Roger Crow's daughter, Patricia Crow. Earlier in the picture, you remember I mentioned that Fred Raglan was a druggist. He worked for Roger Crow. This drugstore is just to the left of us there looking. All the maids of honor. And here comes the Queen. Take those short steps. Wonder how long it took her to know just exactly how to do that.
It's just like Stuttgart's earliest Lynn color.
And the king is waiting.
There's one extra cool float that's going to start when they start with the floats here.
The little girl in the lower right was Sissy Maw. There's Patricia. King and Queen. All the maids.
Yeah, there we go.
That doesn't look like a maid there. It's a big old line. Unknown soldier. Here we go with the military band. AOUW of Arkansas. Arkansas Power and Light Iron, electric iron.
This is like an hour and 45-minute DVD that we have that has got tons of other parade footage and also other footage of other things going on at the time. There is 1927 flood footage on there, and many, many other things. So if anyone wants to see more, just come by and let us know. But I tried to pick a clip that would show both parade and Rice Queen footage. In going through this disc, I actually found that there was one coronation ceremony elsewhere in the disc that I couldn't quite figure out where it was. Everything was. Obviously the businesses were different, so that can make it a little disorienting, but it was also so grand. I was like, where the heck on Maine is this? It looked huge. But very, very cool. So anyway, there was no Rice Carnival after, between 1928 and 1936. 1936 is when they brought it back. Now, the biggest reason that was given for that was the Depression. I did see one source that said that it didn't name the depression, but it said that some of the businessmen on Main were kind of inconvenienced by high traffic at festival time for days on end. And I kind of thought, I don't know if that's really it. I mean, I'm sure it was irritating, but I thought, would that have a bigger impact than the depression? I don't know, but that's just me. But most sources listed the depression. That was what was listed in the 1936 Carnival Guide when they brought it back. Because even this huge, devastating event couldn't keep the carnival fund down forever. It was revived again, and it was brought back by people who really believed in the prosperity of rice as a crop here, and believed that the town could come back from the devastation that had been going on prior to that. And so together, these folks who wanted to bring it back, they developed the Rice Carnival Association. And this association included prominent members of the community such as twice Mayor Harley Stump, Walter Kennedy, who is very influential through his work for the Daily Leader, the Arkansas Rice Growers Co-op, Hart's Thorell Supply, Walton Rice Mill, and Walton Rice Mill were all well represented on the board by A.F. Knoll, Jacob Hartz, A.R. Thorell, and C.R. They loved initials back then. I couldn't find their actual names. C.R. Walton, respectively. And together they set to work returning the carnival to its former glory. And this is the first year of the duck calling contests, and I guess you could say that the rest is history, 1937 is the year that is kind of referred to as the final Rice Carnival, but the carnival does live on, with a new name and new activities. For many years, it looks like we didn't have a name for the festival as a whole. It was just referred to as the duck calling contest for many, many years. And it wasn't until like the 80s, late 80s, we're still confirming this, when it got changed to Wings Over the Prairie as the name for the festival as a whole. And I would be interested in doing a follow-up presentation, kind of picking up where we leave off today, kind of exploring those earliest years of like the 1930s festivals, kind of seeing something a little bit more familiar, I guess, and how it continued to evolve. But for our purposes today, we kind of wanted to focus on those very earliest carnivals and kind of the true origin of what we do even today. That got really quiet at the end, even today. I ran out of steam there. But yeah, there's a slide that, this picture I think is it could be from the 30s, but it could be anywhere between the 30s and 50s. I'd have to cross-reference some of these business names here. But yeah, we're here if you have questions, And I hope this was interesting.
Yeah, for both of us, it struck us not only the grandeur, but the community support.
Yes.
Everybody decorated their houses. Everybody participated. They marched. It was a 2-mile long parade.
Yeah.
And wouldn't that be fabulous?
It would.
I mean, especially after the last time warp of 3 years.
Yeah.
But it just would be so incredible.
And I think, and this is like getting deep maybe, but to see that, the festival would be put on hold, during hardships, but it always got brought back. And I think that really says something about just people. We want to be together and we want to experience joy, and have fun. So it speaks to the human spirit, as corny as that sounds. This was a lot of fun to research, though. It really was.